Hey, this is Andy. For video 3, I'll be discussing the question of how symbolic interactionism has been relevant to my experiences as a sports consumer. And so there are I would say two things or two ways of how it's been relevant to me. And the first one is from my experiences of going to Broncos games throughout the years, and it's the militarization of the Broncos games and NFL games in particular. And this was touched on in the documentary of Not Just a Game, but after watching that, it kind of opened up my memory of how that affected me and how that symbolic interactionism was exposed to me from an early age. And so with the Broncos, of course, with much of the NFL, the military is exploited pretty heavily in games, with the flyovers, the veterans walking out with the players, the national anthem, having servicemen come out for the coin toss, etc. And this has been constantly recreated over time. And so over decades of doing this in weeks and weeks every single year, it seems so normal to us. And that symbol, for most NFL fans, becomes, this football team or the NFL in general is congruent with the military. And from the Carter and Fuller article, they discuss that association of a symbolic gesture leads to the interpretation and then the behavior that one has. And so the association with the Broncos of the NFL, they interpret them as, one with the military, and they act accordingly. And so what I saw was a lot of fans of the games, like throughout the year. I saw this more and more over time, and with friends as well, is the increase in Broncos camouflage wear, and like stuff like that, and just more and more of this outcry for militarism at the football games. And I think it's that combination of the exposure over time and how we interpret that in our minds with our peers over time, and that creates that meaning and that symbolic interpretation of what the Broncos or the NFL means to you. And this leads to my second relevant experience, and that is Colin Kaepernick and his protest against police brutality. And so personally, I would say this is a relevant experience to myself because I saw a lot of tension between friends and family on this issue. I mean, huge tension. And I witnessed, division between good friends for years on this issue whenever there'd be more protests at games. And so this leads back to my kind of association leads to interpretation and behavior. And so, the association with the NFL and the Broncos and the military, when that association of military and football becomes so ingrained in someone's interpretation of this symbolic meaning, what he did seems blasphemous. And someone from my point of view, where I didn't take that symbolic meaning, to me, it looked like he was doing the right thing, and I think he's doing it for a right cause. But for the groups of people who over time have created and recreated that symbol of the militarism and football within their heads and within their peers, they saw this as outrageous. And of course, people, they act based on the meanings that objects have for them. And so for my friends who were totally against it, they acted out of anger and disgust because of what meaning football had for them. And to them, the symbolic meaning of football was military. And so they exhibited that through their behavior and disgust towards Kaepernick and what he had done. And then according to the Carter and Fuller article again, society and individual actors, their experiences and interactions are always in flux and always changing over time. And so with ever-changing interpretation process that people go through with interactions with peers, this symbolic gesture can change. And I saw that a lot with my friends, not only from a personal level, but we also saw that reflected in the media. We see that, from 4 or 5 years ago when this first happened, through more interpretation and interaction with one another, that symbolic meaning has changed and fluctuated. And that was also mentioned in the Carter Fuller article, is that symbolic interactionism is never static, it's never cemented in place, it's always fluctuating. And I think as more time goes on, you'll see more people, interacting and interpreting differently than what they had before. So those would be my two relevant experiences for symbolic interactionism as a consumer. Hope you enjoyed it.